Greetings all! My name is Tim, and I am with the YouTube channel, Tabletop Terrors. I run that channel with my brother James. This is a stream called Daily Damage. Daily Damage is a weekday stream. We try to do as many days of the week as we can, where we just talk about things related to tabletop RPGs and inspiration, usually D&D in general. I always start these streams with something I like to call the rundown, because Facebook takes a little while, up to 2 minutes sometimes, to get the message out to people who would maybe want to watch that I'm live. So in the meantime, I like to talk about some things that you should check out. So this stream is on Tabletop Terrors, but I am part of a small indie RPG publisher called Absolute Tabletop. And if you want to check out any of our stuff, AbsoluteTabletop.com is a cool thing to check out. So that is one part of the rundown. Something else I want to tell you to check out is the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group. We have a Facebook group, and it's not just about our products. It's about positive inspiration. It's about having a good time and just talking to people who are really overall super cool. So those are two things you need to check out. That's the brief rundown. But today I want to get into the meat and potatoes. Unless you're a vegetarian, then we want to get into the potatoes and potatoes of this stream, which is essentially some D&D beginner and primer stuff. And what I'm specifically looking for is, what are those things that we as players wish that we knew when we were first starting out? I think more than ever, new players are being introduced to this game. It's getting more and more popular, and I think until you kind of get the mental image of what's happening, until you kind of get the concept, D&D can seem like this odd thing that's just a little intangible. I have a good friend who's older than me, and he says, you know what, Scotch is one of them things, it's like baseball. You gotta have somebody show it to you. And so I think that much like Scotch and baseball, D&D is something that you need to have somebody show to you. And the number one tip that I want to start off with, the number one thing before I go to the chat, is that you cannot do it wrong if you're having fun. That's it. Theoretically, the stream could end there. Wouldn't be useful, but it would be complete and it would be true and accurate. So, let's go down to the chat and let's talk to people who are smarter than me, who are going to have better ideas, so that we can help teach brand new people who are just getting into the game what are the things that I wish we had known going in. All right. Matthew Knapp is here. Rebecca Saunders is here. BJ Hall says, what up? Check it all out. He's talking about AbsoluteTabletop.com. Let's see. Drake Warren is here. Tyler Hurt says, I like potatoes. I love potatoes. I have them on my cheat day of my diet. Josh Glisson is here. Drake Warren, afternoon, Tim. Afternoon, Drake. Jeremy Lilly. Howdy, everyone. How's it going? Tyler Hurst. I wish I knew it was okay to develop and break into a character. When I say this, I mean that I wish I knew that it was okay to be your character. Right, well, listen up here. My name's Tim, and I'm here because my village, we're hungry. We need simple provisions, like bread. The bread that you just threw away could feed my daughter for 2 days. All I'm asking is that you can absolutely be in character, and I wish I knew that too. You need to make sure that you know that it's okay. Are you going to feel weird? Yeah. Sometimes I still feel weird. But guess what? Is it fun? Triple yeah. Like, it is so cool because you start thinking like these characters and acting like these characters. Now, it's important to know you don't have to do that. I could have easily said, okay, Tim, the level 1 bard, is going to go up and he's going to ask this person for bread. And that's okay, too, if you're starting out and you're like, listen, I didn't sign up for no actor's workshop. So, that's a really good point, Tyler. That is a really good tip. Josh Glisson. Can't do it wrong, but many try. That's true, man. Jeremy Lilly says, look at that baby face terror. Oh, yeah, I'm shaved. I'm shaven. I had our company Christmas party last night, and my wife is far more attractive than me. So in order to try to stay at least within the Venn diagram of her league, I shave my face so that people don't think that I've hired someone who feels bad for me to come to a Christmas dinner. Drake Warren, cooperative storytelling changed my perspective completely. Okay, that's another huge one. If you're starting out in D&D and you're like, what is all of this? It's a bunch of people getting together to tell a story together. Now, there is a referee called a Dungeon Master. We know this. However, the Dungeon Master is just one storyteller who gets to adjudicate or judge how the pieces fit together overall, right? You gotta have a leader among equals, or else the game would fall into chaos and bedlam and things wouldn't progress. So that's the key, though. A Dungeon Master is just the leader among equals. You're all equally telling a story. You're all collaborating. So what Drake's talking about is it's okay to come up with things on the fly and say, you know, it'd be really cool in that bard you were just talking about right there, Tim, who's looking for bread. I want my character to actually be a baker, so I know how easy and cheap it is to make bread. It's like, okay, cool, that's great. Now, you may never have said that before. We're 2 sessions in, you've never talked about it or whatever. That's totally okay. And then it's okay for another character to say, oh, cool, can I be your apprentice? And just come up with these interesting things together. So that's actually another really good one, Drake. And let's see here. BJ Hall, tip, have a game 0. A game 0 is a really good tip. And that basically means, hey, let's all get together and decide what we think is fun. I mean, if you had to distill it down to one sentence, that's what it is. A session 0 is, let's manage all of our expectations. So if I'm going to spend some hours with you playing this game that we're all making up, let's make sure that you're not like, all right, guys, let's do the space western. And the person next to you goes, I thought we were going to do the gritty sci-fi. And the person next to that says, but I'm a sword-slinging fantasy rogue. So deciding on what you all consider is fun is the baseline principle of a session 0. So Chris Wilhelm and I, we hope to do a stream later this week dedicated to what a session 0 is for new players and how they can actually, especially new dungeon masters, how they can use this to talk to their players. But if you need a quick baseline, even if you don't know what that is, if you're getting ready to start a game or a campaign, sit down with the players and let's say, hey, what do you guys consider fun? What do you envision for this campaign? That's really important. Matthew Knapp, you can do scotch wrong even if you're having fun. That's very true. I'm not a big drinker. Craig Crashley Smith, having just started playing, I wish I would have known these 2 things before. 1, just do it. Just play a game. Everything is possible, and it's pretty much roll a d20 to see how you do it. That is a really good point. I think in a lot of things, we wait until we have a very good, firm understanding before we jump in and give it a shot. The cool thing about Dungeons & Dragons is, no matter how much you play, the experience will always be different and unique and interesting. So just sit down and say, okay, we're doing this. In fact, you could even say, all right, guys, let's have a session 0. What do you guys want to do? And if everyone says, I think I'm kind of, we all just been playing Dark Souls. You want to just play kind of like a Dark Souls game? Okay, cool. It's okay to say, now, let's have a practice session. Well, what's a practice session? Well, it's kind of where we go in, doing whatever we feel like we want to do, knowing that there are no repercussions. Now, here's the trick. The practice session part is only for your mind. It's only so you can feel confident enough to jump in and do it. The truth is, every session of D&D is a practice session because there's no right way to do it. So you're constantly, like how doctors practice medicine, you're constantly figuring out how to best express your mood and the tone and what you're feeling for your character and how to best communicate. So it's constant practice. So when I say, hey, do a practice session, that's kind of a trick because all of them are really practice sessions. So that's actually a really good point. Just do it. And he's talking about a D20, which is a 20-sided die. You can find those online, die rollers or dice rollers, or you can go to a game shop and buy, it's usually this little brick made by a company called Chessex, or they have some in the case. It's a die with 20 sides on it. If you Google D20, you'll go, oh, that's what I've been seeing on all those t-shirts. Oh, and number 3, don't be afraid to play. Yeah, and so that's, I think, there's not a way to do it wrong. And if you do it, you're doing it right. Have some fun. Chris Villanueva says, think knowing that your character doesn't need to be perfect is a big one. Sometimes failing is just as fun as slaying the dragon. I love that. I love having characters fail because when they fail, it gives them room to succeed later. Something else to know, you don't have to know everything about your character starting out. In fact, it's fun to learn about your character as you progress and play games. Like I said just a moment ago, hey, I think I want my character to be a baker. You don't have to know that in session 1 when you're making the character. You can just leave some of the background information blank with some big sort of tent poles. Like, for instance, you can say, yeah, I want my character to be someone who is kind of a low-level laborer. They're not really wealthy. Maybe that's just enough for you. But figuring those things out as you work through and tell the story together, it really makes sense because, like any good television show, it's not just one person writing things. It's a writer's room, a staff of people designed to work well together, and that's what you are. You're the writer's room. And as you play this game, people are going to inspire you. And then as weeks go by and you see a TV show you like or hear a song you love or read a comic book, you might want to take an element you saw in there and drop it in. And here I'm going to add one that I think is amazing, which is when you're playing in a home game, steal, steal, steal. This whole game is about being inspired by other things. It's totally okay unless you're going to sell it or pass it off as your own. That's not okay. But the point of this is just say, oh, that worked really well for you. I see this in a game online. I'm going to use it in my game. Or, oh, this is a really cool article I found. The point is to take that article and drop it into your game. That's really something I wish someone would have told me, which is you don't have to be brand new, spanking original. Use some pre-made stuff for a little while and alter it as you go. Tyler Hurst says, also, I wish I would have known that backstory should be vague and not completely developed. Oh, that's what we're talking about. This gives you and your DM creative freedom and the ability to involve your character. This also ultimately makes the game far more interesting for individual players as well. Be creative, but don't overdevelop a backstory. Leave room for development. I think that's great. There are things that you don't have to think about at all. Well, who are my parents? If that's important to you and you really want to try to figure that out, go for it. But as of right now, I'm playing in a campaign online, and I know really not much about my parentage. I know a little bit, but I'm purposefully leaving that vague for exactly this reason. As I go through the sessions and we make up stories and, kind of go through the motions here, I'm going to wait for something that inspires me, and I'm going to go, oh, that gives me a inspirational seed. I want my parents to be X. And then the Dungeon Master can say, yeah, that's actually really cool. Let's work on that. And you don't have to figure that out in-game either. You can just say, hey, if it's cool with you, I'll work with you this week. But I'd love for my parents to be involved with this part of the plot hook if that's cool. And a great Dungeon Master will say, yeah, that's perfect. Bradley Pierce says, D&D is all about having some brews and good times. Michael Kennedy, my best tip for beginner players, you don't have just the mechanics to tell you what to do. If there isn't a role for it, just straight up say, my character does blank. That's actually a really good point. One of the things, it's a collaborative story, and we talked about this referee called the Dungeon Master. This Dungeon Master, it's really their job to tell you how you're allowed to do something. It's your job to just throw stuff at them. And I see this especially with newer players, they are concerned about exactly the opposite of what Michael's suggesting. They try to take their ideas and filter them through the filter of the rules. Let me tell you what that does. It takes a lot of the cool factor out of it. It's like orange juice with no pulp. You're like, here's all the pulp. Well, in this analogy, the pulp is cool. So take the strainer out. Take the rules out of your head. Just shoot for it. Go say, hey, you know what I want? I want my character would really try. I want to try to pretend that I'm one of the royal guards. Now, it's the Dungeon Master's job, or this Game Master. It's their job to adjudicate that and say, okay, now, they might say, it's going to be really tough, and you're going to have to do this, this, and this, and this, and that's okay. But don't worry and say, let me look at my character sheet. Okay, I have a skill, and I have this, and I want to use this skill to try this to do. It's like, don't worry about that. You just shoot pure, concentrated awesome at your Dungeon Master. Let it shine out of your face. Look like a Snapchat. Just, and then The Dungeon Master then has to take it and catch it and say, okay, here's how let's try this. Now be flexible, be cool. Let's change the world one bro move at a time, and be understanding. If the Dungeon Master is like, well, I haven't really planned for that, so let's talk it out, or, hey, can you give me a second while I figure out how to do that? That's great. But don't funnel your ideas through the mechanics or through the character sheet. Just go for it, and if the Dungeon Master needs you to use some rules to achieve something, be cool about it and go from there. That's actually really good, Michael. Chris Villanueva says, as a DM, knowing that your enjoyment is just as important as the players having fun. I wish I knew that instead of only worrying about my players enjoying things and not worrying about how I felt. That's actually a good point, and that, again, angles it toward, we're all players. You are adventurers, and I'm the Dungeon Master, but we're all players. And so, I think that's where it becomes very important to know in that session 0, that first, kind of meeting, hey, what's fun for you? If I'm running the game, what might be fun for me is, hey, I love coming up with puzzles, and I love coming up with traps. But if that's the only thing that's fun for me, and you guys are like, hey, we really aren't looking for a puzzle trap heavy game, well, then you got to have a conversation. But that's true. As a player, the Dungeon Master has to have fun, because if they're not having fun, the adventure will show it. And also, the adventure won't go on very long. So it's like, no, I can't play this week, and things like that. That's actually a really good point. Thomas Carpenter says, what up, y'all? What have I missed? Nah, man, we're just going over some basic, we're going over some, primer stuff, like D&D Basic 101, what would you want someone to have told you if you were doe-eyed and just like, wow, a new book about D&D. What would you wish that they would have told you going in so that you'd really be able to just grab the proverbial dungeon bull by the horns and go for it? Michael Kennedy says, here's a tip for someone not sure if they should DM as a beginner DM, and if you're unsure how they could have fun as a DM. You can have fun. Players rarely get to have. You get to play as villains and enjoy designing things like I used as a kid, like designing my ideal video game. That's a really good point. The Dungeon Master gets to frame the world, and as the players sort of help build parts of it, you get to come up with the crazy ingredients that you're going to use to make this big stew. And so that's actually a really good point. It's a different kind of fun. The players get to navigate this obstacle course, but you get to come up with, hey, I want this challenge, and I want this to be interesting. And if you can find a really good balance between taking that obstacle or placing that piece on the board and then working with your players so that they're connected to it in some way, if you're going to say, oh, I want them to be part of a crime syndicate, I want them to fight a crime syndicate. A really cool way is to have one of your players say, oh, I'd love to have been maybe a low-level enforcer for that crime syndicate, but I'm trying to get out. Boom, immediate conflict, and that's a really cool way that both of you can have fun. That's actually really good. Another great tip from Michael Kennedy. Josh Glisson says, underrated tip, have planned breaks. I could not agree with this more. At the end of the day, all of what you're doing is coming from your mind. Even if you're using maps and terrain and little miniature figures to kind of show where you are, or if you're doing everything entirely in your imagination, no matter what, the players and their attentiveness and their ability to kind of, gobble up information, that's all really important. And to keep the saw sharp, be sure to have those planned breaks. How often should you do it? Well, have planned breaks as often as your group needs them. If you're playing with younger players, have them more often. You want to keep their attention span. You also should probably decide on a time limit, okay? So if you're getting together and doing the session 0, for me, the sweet spot is 4 hours with a break in the middle. That's my gaming. I like to do 2 hours, break, 2 hours. Now, break is like 10 minutes. Just get up, use the restroom, get a drink. So for me, that's also important. So yes, planned breaks. Don't be afraid to do that on purpose and discuss. Hey guys, all right, well, hey, we'll be here at this time. We'll start at this time. We're going to take a break, after the first couple hours, and then we'll wrap up right at 9 o'clock. And hold to that. Even if you have to break in a weird spot or things get, just be respectful of people's schedules, and they'll continue to come back. They'll continue to be on time because they know that you're going to run an on-time game. That's really good. Lawrence Kentworthy is here. Bradley Pierce says tabletop is greater than console gaming. I think that I love both. And I'm not going to try to pit one versus the other because they're both very, very good at what they do. What tabletop gaming does as a player, as a dungeon master, and what I wish someone would have told me is, it allows for your imagination to be stimulated in a way that forces you to critically think. Now, video games can do this as well, but there's more weight put onto my mind in a tabletop game. Here's what I mean. Video games are amazing. Like, I'm getting ready to buy, I think, The Witcher 3 is what I'm really thinking I'm going to play next. I'm not a huge gamer. I don't really have as much time built into my schedule, but I'm trying to make sure I can game more because games are fun. But that's the key, is that a video game takes care of all the visual aspects for you. And a tabletop game, you have to imagine some of those things. So, again, they're both good at certain things, but to me, because I can do anything, go anywhere, be anyone, I can decide how it looks, we can describe how it looks together, we can change it on the fly. These are all things that aren't necessarily possible in a video game. Video games are set, the way that they look, the way the creatures look and all that stuff, which can be amazing because they're designed to work well together. But if you're really looking for that source of adventure, designing things and critically thinking of things together can be amazing. So that's something else I wish people would have told me, which is, don't be afraid to collaborate and come up with how things look or how things are designed together. I play in a game online called The Winds of Ursuline, and Barker from Be a Better Game Master, he actually, this is the first time I've ever seen a game master do this. He started throwing things to the players and say, what is etched on this door? And what does this sigil mean? And this is a dangerous thing. If the players come up with something goofy, you have to have veto power. But it's also a really empowering thing because the players feel invested in the world, and it's a pretty amazing feeling. Jack Pert is here. Chris Villanueva says, I use videos when I have time to play as inspirations. Third tips, inspirations for games is anywhere if you're looking. So I totally concur with this. Especially, okay, you're a player, you're new to the game, you're trying to kind of get into things. Sometimes the most basic thing, like, hey, what kind of character do I want to play? You can find these things in media anywhere. You can find Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean. You could do, there's no limit. You could do people from those video games we were talking about. You're like, I want to play the dude from The Witcher. Now, here's a tip, and this is a tip I wish someone would have told me. In most media, whether it's film, books, video games, whatever, in most media, when we see the character, they fully ripened, and they are at a peak of their ability. In Dungeons & Dragons, one of the most fun things, I think, is to grow in power as your character. So if you say, hey, I want to make The Witcher as my character, it's probably not a great idea to start out and say, okay, I want to be him at this power level. It's better to say, okay, I want to start as him at his origins. How do we start out? Our humble beginnings. Because it's, especially as a beginning player, it's much easier, I think, to start at a lower level, learn those abilities, level up, learn those abilities. If you played World of Warcraft, you know what I'm talking about. If you learn your abilities one by one, you know your way around that interface. If you log into someone else's account and you see all those crazy buttons, you don't know what to do. It's the same feeling as if you're playing a new character who's a higher level, you just don't know what you have in your arsenal. So it's, to me, for a beginning player, it's better to start at level 1, then level up to 2, level up to 3, and slowly learn that stuff. So don't start and say, I want to be epic. Start and say, I can't wait to slowly become epic. And here's the goal I have in mind. Scott Eustace is here. What's up? Let's see here. John C. Is it Baham? I've never played D&D before, but my family and I are trying to get into it. If I live in an area where I can't find a close enough game to play for players, I would recommend playing online, like at Roll20.net or some other place like that. If so, where? Let me tell you, to me, one of the best places to find games is in these 3 online Facebook groups. These 3. The Absolute Tabletop Facebook group, the Tabletop RPG One-Shot group, and the RPG Brigade. I'm a member of those communities. I post in those communities. I interact in those communities. That is the best place, I believe, to find quality players, and you can also see a lot of those players in games already. So you can watch games they've been in to see if their play style matches what you're looking for. That would be it. I have no problem with Roll20. My biggest issue is that I like to record my games, and to do it with Roll20, it takes a lot more doing. Whereas if I do it on YouTube, I can have the games record automatically. Now YouTube's been going through some problems, and hopefully they're getting them squared away. But that's what I would suggest, John. Josh Glisson says, don't be afraid to try new ideas, methods, etc. Even if your gaming group never has. The worst thing that can happen is one wasted night. And if you had fun hanging out, it's not really wasted. I was first in the group to use a laptop or videos, PC, sounds, and etc. That's actually a really good point, which is everything he said. And to take it even further, remember what I was telling you before. Every session is a practice session. So truly, you're going to find one thing at least that you really liked about that night. So even if you hated everything, you'd be like, you know what, Al? I really like this. And if I'm wrong and you hate everything, now you can vehemently say, no, I don't like A, B, and C because I tried it and this is why. And at least your opinion is informed and educated, and it's not based on a whim or a feeling. So that's really solid advice. Mike Lasham is here. Check out, super cool video series. I just posted it to the Tabletop Terrors Facebook page a couple of days ago. Mike Lasham has a game, and it's kind of his campaign world. It's called the Ironhead Chronicles, and it's D&D in a more modern time. Now, I don't mean 2016. I mean, it's probably, what would you say, Mike, like sort of an amalgamation between like the 30s and 40s, maybe even sooner, like maybe the 20s and 30s. But the idea is dwarves and half-orcs with guns, grenades, and trains, and it's super cool. But Mike has done a really good job at running games in that. So if you're a new player and you're looking to kind of get into something that's interesting, check out his new series on Mike Space the Piper, all one word. He's got like 5 videos in a playlist, how to use D&D in a modern setting. Check that out. It was super good. I'm a fan. Scott says, hello. Michael Kennedy says, DM tip. Don't info dump at the beginning of a campaign or one-shot. You can have it come up as your character knows blank about the world as needed, or as NPC dialogue, and this can help fill out your session. A massive backstory from a player character is tedious, but so is a massive 80-page scrolling Star Wars text from a DM. I'd recommend a couple sentences, like 3 to 5, to tell your intro and then run the game. I'll even take that a step further, which is great books assume you're going to know what's going on because they focus on the right things. Great movies, the same thing. At most, like you said, you get that white blurb at the beginning, which basically says, it was a time of war in the kingdoms. The dragons ruled. It's like, that's it. Then you know it's a time of war in the kingdom and dragons ruled. That's all I need to know. But the even more adept and savvy books, cinema, comics, they throw you in, and by focusing on the right elements, you understand through context what's going on. Revealing things at the right time is key. I believe that people feel suspense and curiosity because they don't know information, not because they do. So the key is giving them enough so that they can get a cohesive idea of what's happening, but withhold just enough so that they're hungry to learn more. That's actually a really good point, Michael. Tyler Hurst. As a dungeon master, I've learned that giving players pieces of world building pre-game will produce ideas and concepts you would have never thought of. As a dungeon master, doing this will help you build a world where your players feel involved. If a concept that a player creates doesn't completely fit your world, you can suggest minor changes. What if this? Or how about that? Doing this in-game also provides amazing results. Spencer Shields is here, Shields of War. So again, this goes back to if you're a player, you're just learning, you're trying to figure out D&D, what's going on, you get to make up whatever you want. But again, you are one member of a band. You got to come together, and the music has to be harmonious to a degree. You can't be like, yeah, man, here's my jazz flute. And they come in and they're like, well, here's my one-man cymbal band. And it's like, well, we could even make that work as long as you're in the same tempo and you're playing at least the same patterns and syncopation. But if everybody shows up and improv's like, what? It sounds like a Guitar Center. And I want to put my head in a guillotine in Mike Lasham's gaming world. So that's the key. Get on the same sheet of music, or at least get in the same genre and style. But that's like what you're suggesting. That's really cool. If you say to your player who says, like, let's take it back to the original analogy or original example. Hey, I want to be a baker. Perfect. Make up a bakery. Tell me a little more about that. Is it successful? Is it unsuccessful? Like, what is going on? And let them really bite into that and bring it into your world, because they're going to spend more time on it than you ever would. Or should, probably better. Josh Glisson says, what other kinds of shields are there other than shields of war? There are shields for craft, but like, I guess that could be for war. There are wind shields, shields of wind. So like when you're driving down the street, you don't get bugs in your eyes. Back in the day, they thought if you drove more than 60 miles an hour, your face would rip off. So anyway, I loved this stream. This is really great. Thank you all for tuning in. But this is just kind of a primer. I was thinking of doing this like once a week. You know, I do a lot of streams, but I was thinking a lot of them are heady and they're more topics for like veteran players. And I thought, you know what? I really want to reach out to some people just getting into the game and talk about some basic things they might not know. So anyway, this has been amazing. You all have brought some amazing tips, and we'll do it again soon. Check out AbsoluteTabletop.com. And until next time, may your dice roll high.